Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wine.com Experiences. I'm Gwendolyn Osborne. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited. We're doing something a little new and different because we are pairing wines and chocolate today. If you purchased this set, the wine and chocolate set from Wine.com ahead of time, fantastic. Please go ahead and get those wines into some glassware to taste. And if you do have the chocolates, I recommend kind of maybe breaking off a square of each to have on hand for them. You'll kind of see, like, you've got a little plate with a little square of chocolate. So something along those lines. We're going to kind of give you some instructions as well. The three wines that we're tasting in order are the La Crema, Rosé of Pinot Noir, the Hartford Court Russian River Valley Pinot Noir, and the Murphy-Goode Liar's Dice Zinfandel. And then let me tell you about the chocolates here. So the vine to bar chocolates that you have, they come in this lovely box. And for the rosé, we will be tasting the almonds and Himalayan pink salt. And then for the Russian River Valley Pinot Noir, the Hartford Court, we're going to be tasting the tart cherry and cocoa nibs. And then the Liar's Dice Zinfandel, we will be tasting the dark chocolate. And then the dark chocolate with Chardonnay, smoked salt, and cocoa nibs. So for that last wine, we're going to have two. This is a little setup here that we have, just kind of an idea with the tasting mat we provided for each of your wines and a little square of chocolate. Also, highly encourage you to have a glass of water, although we have been told from our chocolate expert that room temperature water is the best kind to have, not too cold, definitely not ice water. That'll help you have the best experience. So speaking of these guests, I have some wonderful ones to talk through the wines and the chocolate and how those interact together. From Jackson Family Estates, we have Master Sommelier and Director of Global Key Accounts, Michael Jordan, and Vice President of Education, Gillian Handelman. And then from Vine to Bar Chocolates, we have Vice President of Innovation, Ralph Jerome. Hi.
Hi.
So great to have you guys here. I am really excited to do this. It's our first chocolate and wine adventure, if you will, and tasting. And the wines are delicious. I've been eating the chocolates the past week also. So I know they're delicious as well. So very excited to put these together and talk about pairing. So for those of you at home, we are going to be going in a little bit to the story of the chocolate and how it came about. So feel free to start sipping on your wines, but I'm going to ask you to please wait on the chocolate. Don't start eating the chocolate quite yet. Just wait for us. We'll get to it. There'll be a little bit of a process so that you'll get the most out of this. So I think what I want to start with story-wise is a little bit of just what are we talking about? And that is because this vine to bar chocolate is infused or blended with Chardonnay Marc. And so, Michael, I'm going to come to you first to explain for those of those that might not know, what is Marc?
Well, thank you, Gwendolyn, and welcome everybody. This is my favorite day because I love chocolate and I love wine. So we're just so happy. So what is Marc? Well, it's M-A-R-C. The C is pronounced silently in French. And Mar is really kind of what's left in the vat after we ferment our red wines, the skins and stems and the seeds. But Chardonnay Marc is so very different because we don't ferment white grapes, before we press. So wait, what do you mean? Well, when you make red wine, you ferment and soak red grapes and macerate to get color out of them and aroma and pigment and all of those things that make red wines yummy. But with white wines, we put the grapes right in the press and squeeze them and get the juice out and then ferment the juice without the skins and stems or seeds. So there's a very different process. So when you have Chardonnay Marc, which is the skins and the seeds left, it hasn't been fermented. It is the fresh fruit that's been pressed, and the skins and seeds of fresh fruit, not fermented, has a very, very different flavor and beautiful bright acidity and intensity of flavor rather than more of an alcohol infused flavor from being fermented into wine.
Both are great. But yeah, I think that that's what's so interesting about this is that idea that we're taking the Chardonnay Marc and it hasn't been fermented yet. So, and I feel that it's a very sustainable thing also because you're using something after a wine is being made. Ralph, I'm going to bring that to you next to say, what is that process? You get the grape skins and the pips, and then how do we make that into something that can then be blended with chocolate?
Well, thanks for the question, and thanks for having me. This is a great experience, and I've worked with chocolate for a long time, so this is an awesome combination with wine and chocolate because they're both ancient, they're both fermented, they both have an origin story. So the combination is just so cool. The winemakers actually came up with the idea of combining these things. So it was inspired by winemakers. And when you think about this story that Michael was just telling, this is a beautiful raw material. You know, I've worked with raw materials my whole life, and the fact that we have such a beautiful raw material that we then dry, and then we have to mill, but we have to be very careful in drying it so that we don't blow off all the beautiful aromatics that are part of the flavor of the Chardonnay Marc. And then in addition to that, we need to be very careful about the particle size, because one thing we know about great chocolate is that great chocolate is smooth, and we need to make sure the particle size is right. One other thing about the Chardonnay Marc is that it's loaded with really good nutrition. So there's things called phytochemicals and flavanols and oligosaccharides, and they're all in there, which makes the chocolate even more nutritious. So it's great combination.
I'm so all for nutritious chocolate. And this is the fine powder. What we're looking at right now, is that how much you kind of you make it into this fine? Is it called a powder? Is it a powder?
Exactly. So that fine powder is blended into the chocolate, and then we go through what's called a refining step to reduce the particle size. So you get this real, and also when you're refining it, you're also blowing out and creating these aromatics that come through and meld with the fat. One other thing that's really interesting about this chocolate, I think, is that the sourness, the acidity from the Chardonnay Marc actually offsets some of the natural astringency which is present in cocoa. So it's a beautiful blend.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is how does blending this affect the chocolate, either the texture or the taste? So you're saying it kind of takes down a little bit of that, it's the bitterness or astringency.
Yeah, and that's why we can have such a, we're at 65 to 67% cocoa solids, and we still have this smooth flavor, which is partly from the acidity, partly from the aromatics, and we've got an aromatic sweetness as well as, the sweetness from some of the sugar in the Chardonnay Marc as well.
Great. So now I'm going to bring this to you, Gillian, because you're kind of that food and wine pairing guru. So with doing that to the chocolate, of kind of reducing the astringency from that acidity, how do you think that affects pairing with wine?
Excellent question. First of all, good to see you, Gwendolyn. And it's a joy to be speaking on a Wine.com webinar. I'm so happy that you guys have killed it this year. There's something about geeks, when you talk to wine geeks, that they will often say, well, chocolate and wine, I'm not completely sure if it works. But the truth is that it can work. There's just the question of astringency and tannins. But when you handle the tannins with the Marc, it tempers it and adds not only the acidity, which is so essential, which Ralph was referring to, but there's also a subtle acidity. And you have to remember, and of course, you guys all know this, but it's important for everyone out there in tasting land to remember that not only are we considering the things on our palate, but we're also considering what we're smelling afterwards, the retronasal effect of tasting. And so all of the aromatics that come out of the Marc also tend to elevate the aromatics in the wine. And so you've got, really something pretty dynamic happening with this. And we can't undervalue the fact that this is a superfood. So once you put superfood together with chocolate, I think a lot of people get pretty excited.
Yeah. And first, I love that you're like everyone in tasting land, because I'm going to just want to live in tasting land now. I also, Ralph mentioned like these are fermented products, and I'm kind of also thinking I could just live off of fermented products as well once you add cheese into my life with the chocolate and the thing. So, well, this is great. I want to start going in, I think, to the tasting. So, for those of you who might have the chocolate and wine at home, we have these 4 chocolates, we have 3 wines. So for you to get the most out of the tasting, what we want to do is we want to sip the wine first and kind of really take in the wine and what that tastes like. And then while we discuss the chocolate with Ralph, we're going to taste the chocolate. And the first one we have, I'm going to ask him to give us a little 101 on tasting chocolate and what we want to do, because we're going to let that kind of melt and absorb in our mouth. And then Gillian, I'm going to have you kind of jump in to taste the wine after that, and we'll be able to talk about that interaction. Good plan?
Sounds good.
Excellent.
Good plan. Let's do this. Okay. So first up, we have the La Crema Rosé Pinot Noir from La Crema Winery. This one comes from Monterey. Michael, just if you could give us kind of an overview of this wine, maybe a little bit about Monterey and how this climate is ideal for Pinot Noir, especially when making a Pinot Noir to become a rosé.
Happy to. Monterey is one of the coolest areas. It's kind of cool. We like it, but it's the temperature-wise one of the coolest areas in all of the state of California, because the ice cold water in the Monterey Bay and the deep, deep canyon in the ocean creates all this cold water coming in and cold air is on top. And so there's fog in the Salinas Valley, which is the valley that these vineyards are all located in, going south from Monterey, right on the other side of the mountain from Big Sur. Okay. Fog in the morning, for sure. Fog in the evening. And then as the land starts to heat up and the deep end of the valley gets warm and that heat rises, it sucks in cold ocean air from the Monterey Bay. And we know the air on top of that water up there is very cold. So it creates a very, very consistent, like 72 average temperature, 72 degrees average all year long. If I was a grape, I would want to ripen at 72 degrees. It is the longest ripening season almost anywhere on the globe for grapes. And the longer they can hang on the vine, the more flavor, intensity, and color, and all the great things that make grapes delicious will be in the grape by the time they're phenologically ripe. Now, with this rosé, typically rosé can be made, one of 3 ways. You can blend white and red wine together, and bam, you got rosé. That's okay. I'll drink it. I'm not a snob. There's another way we call saignée. You bleed off some of the juice when you're making a beautiful ripe red wine. But this way, they grow the fruit specifically for making rosé, and that means we pick it a little younger. We don't let it get really super ripe. We want higher natural grape acidity in the wine. And when we ferment that juice, we're going to drain off that juice before those skins have had a chance to stain them fully red. Just the perfect pink color. And then we drain the juice away from the skins and seeds and have this beautiful pink wine. Now, when you're smelling this wine, I like to start above the glass and bring it up slowly, because there's little beautiful light notes above the glass, pretty floral notes and light pretty fruit that exists above. And then the deeper, heavier fruit aromas are down in the bowl. But this is a fresh, refreshing, crisp, like a great specimen of a Pinot Noir rosé from Monterey County.
It is. I think it's a perfect example. It's beautiful. It's got the strawberry and the raspberry and the watermelon. I got watermelon once I really dug in and swirled it. So it's just kind of summer fruit bowl, but also delicious in November. That's beautiful. So let's taste it. Maybe you can kind of talk us through the tasting of that and how that represents, Pinot as a rosé maker and this region.
Thank you. Well, California is becoming really famous for Pinot Noir rosé, whereas, other regions of the world, every region makes rosé out of their local grapes. Southern Rhone, it's Syrah, Grenache based. And here in California, we have so much amazing Pinot Noir. It is really a pretty flavored fruit. And that transcends to a real pretty set of flavors in our dry rosés and these floral notes. And as you said, strawberry, wild strawberries, a little bit of watermelon. Sometimes we get these great citrusy notes, like even ruby red sweet grapefruit, and certainly other things that are aligned with that give you that beautiful citrusy acidity. But I think Pinot Noir also has a different texture. And that's something we're going to talk a lot about today, especially with these beautiful chocolates. As you know, Ralph was saying, he manages to get the smoothest texture in that chocolate. And in these wines, each of them will be different texturally, and that will be part of the pairing, not just the flavors.
Right. So Ralph, let's move on to that chocolate. So the first chocolate we have is the almond with pink Himalayan salt, Himalayan pink salt. I'm not sure which order that goes in, but so that is what we're going to be tasting with the rosé. So can you tell us, what do we do now?
Yeah, so
give us some direction.
Great. And I think it's so wonderful to hear the wine descriptions. And I think the chocolate industry can learn a lot from wine, because there's so much complexity to chocolate that kind of gets lost when people just open up a candy bar, right? And there's a distinction in my mind, between a candy bar and what we've got here. What we've got is chocolate with some accents of different elements, whether it's almonds, cocoa nibs, or tart cherry.
So people, just real quick, should people be kind of eating it and letting it kind of melt and absorb while we're talking about it?
So I would take a bite, let it melt a little bit, get it warmed up in your mouth, and then you can chew it. I mean, it's good to chew it. If you want to coat it and you want to feel, one of the things, well, I'll go into, let me just talk about how to think about chocolate a little bit. So one thing is open the wrapper, and then just the aroma is so wonderful. And it's not just the chocolate in this case, right? We have that wonderful superfood Chardonnay Marc in here that also has some aromatics that come out that are lovely. Another thing is to look at it, and the beauty of the chocolate is that you actually see this gloss, right? And that means the chocolate was prepared properly in the factory, right? That it was actually tempered right. And chocolate has a very specific crystalline structure, and you want to get that beta prime crystal so that you get this maximum reflectance and you get the right melting point. So you want the chocolate to actually melt at body temperature. And we've done something here where we've got quite a bit of cocoa butter in the product, which is a wonderful fat. Like I said, it melts at body temperature, but it also gives a little bit of a cooling effect, which helps, give you a texture that's not claggy like peanut butter and things like that. Another thing to do with a good chocolate is, I don't know if you heard that, but the snap. Good chocolate has this beautiful snap to it if it's well tempered. And then, of course, the taste and the texture. So specifically on this product, the one that you've got, which is the almond with the pink Himalayan salt. This one, you're going to get all the things I mentioned. You're going to get that start out. You're going to get some real rich chocolate flavors, and then it's going to end with some of that acidity, which offsets the astringency of the cocoa. We've done something with the cocoa where we've kept a lot of the things that are good for you in chocolate are the cocoa flavanols. We have over 200 milligrams of cocoa flavanols in each serving, and they can be astringent. But what we've done is we've blended in this Chardonnay Marc, which actually accents them in a way that is very complementary. So with this product, you get that that flavor build, but you also get the crunch from the almond. But then you get that the salt at the very beginning. You get it, depending on if you eat it from one side or the other. You get the salt, and that helps with your mouth to water a little bit. And the combination of salt, sour, bitter, sweet is all happening together and then you have the aromatics and what we say with the Chardonnay Marc, it's mostly red fruit and some brown fruit with a little bit of caramel notes that come through. So enjoy.
Yeah, I just love how much this sounds like wine tasting. I mean, we're talking about looking at the chocolate. We're talking about smelling the chocolate. We're talking about the texture. We're talking about acidity. We're talking about I mean, they're just so similar. And I love that of taking the time to pay attention to tasting a chocolate the same way one would do a wine. So thank you. Gillian, come in with me. Let's taste the wine again after we've tasted this chocolate and talk us through what your thoughts are on how
Absolutely.
this is integrating.
So I think one of the things you want to do, again, in tasting land is if you have tasted the chocolate, I think one of the ways that you want to approach food and wine pairing is you want to try the wine first, then the food, and then go back to the wine, because that gives you a real baseline and then an impression of what happens after you try the wine with the food. So I'm going to try my wine again, even though I still have chocolate on my palate, and it's going to confirm what happened with me in practice session, which is that, you know, I ship these chocolates and I'm a skeptic, as I said before, but these chocolates really won me over in terms of how wine pairs with them, because two things. One, the Marc definitely tempers and buffers that bitterness, but also the salt is genius. Salt is a friend to acidity. And you guys have to know that salt is the #1 compound that you're going to find in pretty much all of the food across America and across the globe. Remember, wars have been won and fought over salt. Salt is a dynamite and precious, precious commodity for so many reasons. And it's because it elevates whatever it is that you're tasting. And the way to make salt your friend at the table is with acidity. So let's think about this little piece of chocolate here. It has nuts, right? And nuts are fat. Nuts release so much of the tension or bitterness or tannin in different foods and make them accessible to wine. And then the salt leaves you wanting for something to refresh. And guess what? You've got this beautiful wine with the mandarin orange, the watermelon characteristics, almost I'm not going to go so far as saying Jolly Rancher, but we all know what that means, that burst of acidity, right? And you pair that, and there's not only this wash of like, okay, that took care of the salt, it makes me want to go back in for another bite. And so rosé, salt, nuts, and this chocolate as a combination is really a wonderful triad.
Yeah, it does. It works so well in harmony. And I love that about salt. The wars were won and lost over this, but it does. It says such a crucial point in certain wine pairings and absolutely delicious together. So we're going to go on to the next wine, which is a Pinot Noir from Russian River Valley. So let's see, we're going to Hartford Court, Russian River Valley Pinot Noir. Here we are, Russian River Valley. One of the top places for amazing Pinot Noir. Michael, can you kind of just talk a little bit about Hartford Court Pinot Noir as a place and the Russian River Valley and this grape?
I would be delighted. Hartford Court, the Hartford family has been making great Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Zinfandel for many years. Many years. This is family owned and operated. They have tiny little amazing vineyards located throughout Russian River and the Sonoma coast. These are little blocks of fruits, many of them carved out from and in between evergreen trees, and some are very cool, some are a little warmer, some have different soil types, because the Russian River Valley has more soil types than all of France. Okay, I know, that's what I said. What? And the winery there, as you can see, they even have some La Tâche clone Pinot Noir growing in the front yard at this winery. That is just amazing that they continue to graft off and expand. But this is a blend of several vineyards within the Russian River Valley. Some are a little cooler, some are a little warmer, from different neighborhoods within Russian River. And so there's a great degree of complexity, layers of flavor in this wine. But what does it have that really makes you know it's Pinot Noir? And that is the perfume before you even taste, and that translucent ruby gorgeous color when you look through the glass. But it's beckoning you. There's perfume on this wine of like dried rose petals or maybe a potpourri kind of a thing, and some sandalwood, which is really beautifully scented wood. It's expensive French oak, but it comes off in the form of like a sandalwood kind of a thing. And then the fruit, where we're talking about black cherries and black raspberries, and then some red fruit. There's red fruit and black fruit, both, because it's very complex from these different little neighborhoods of Russian River Valley. And Jeff Stewart, the winemaker there, I mean, he's worked in some of the greatest vineyards and wineries, certainly in wine country in California over his many years. He really has a great taste and ability to manage texture and not over oak, but let fruit shine. And that's really the style here. So there are some savory flavors, there's some fruit driven flavors, there are aromatics and pretty flavors. I mean, and I think all of those flavors that I just described are kinds of flavors that you can imagine would work really well with some type of chocolate. And the acidity makes your mouth juice up, and that cleanses your palate so you can taste that next bite of chocolate even better.
I do love that. And I love this kind of complexity too, where I almost can't pinpoint anything because everything's so well integrated. And that's a different level of complexity where you're like, wait, oh, and everything's just melding together. It's integrated so well, but it does say Pinot to me. It also to me says Christmas Pinot. There's something about the spices in there that make me think of the holidays, which I love. But this is beautiful. And again, it has that acidity. So let's look at the chocolate we have. Ralph, maybe you can talk a little bit about this next one we have. It has tart cherry in it, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
What is that adding to this whole flavor?
So the tart cherry is such a beautiful complement with the Chardonnay Marc, because to me, this combination is just magical. And one of the things to notice, I mentioned how nice a bar should look, but if you look at the bar it's a beautiful canvas. You've got the combination of colors, and you've got the sheen of the chocolate plus these cocoa nibs. And I'll explain what a cocoa nib is. It's really a broken up bean. So each nib is 100% cocoa solids. And it's like you get this little bomb of chocolate intensity and texture at the same time as you're eating it. Another thing that's beautiful about this is that every bite is kind of different, because the way we've dispersed the inclusions, they're not uniformly like they came out of a machine. They're scattered around. So we want each bite to be an experience in itself. So with this one, I think the beauty of this is that the Chardonnay Marc plus the combination of the tart cherry it builds, and at the end you get that acidity that clears up the chocolate really well. So that's the basis of this chocolate.
I love this one. I don't think I've tried this one yet. I love this chocolate. So Gillian, thank you. Let's taste a Pinot with that and see how it changes a little bit.
Absolutely. And one of the things I would recommend is that you take a sip of water between some of these tastings, because I think you notice like a little bit of that chocolate goes a long, long way. And taking a big bite of it, I think, is going to do a little disservice. Take little bites as you go, and then afterwards you can, wolf it down. Okay, so water.
Water first.
Then I go back into the Pinot, and of course I've been tasting it already because it's hard not to. And Pinot's job, everyone has a job, right? Rosé's job is to be charming and to go with everything and to be bright and brilliant and to work with every single occasion and every single season. Pinot's job is to be sensual and to be silky and to be a come hither kind of wine that draws you in. And this wine does the trick. The silkiness surprised me with the silkiness of the chocolate, because of course you guys out there, you know exactly what we're going to say. It couldn't be more intuitive, which is that the cherry characteristics in this chocolate bridge beautifully with the red fruit characteristics of the wine, right? But that's a non sequitur. You already knew that was coming. So what I want to point to more is the silkiness of this wine and the silkiness of the chocolate, because texture is everything. At some point, texture is the greatest gift that you can take away from food. And beyond the hedonism and the love of being together as we are and talking together, texture is a gift. And so the cherry, boom, the texture, ooh la la.
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, texture is kind of one of those make or break things of whether or not you love a food or maybe don't love a food. I mean, there's so much to go into that. And I mean, both of these chocolates I've had so far are just have amazing texture. And the way it melds into that suppleness of the Pinot, like you said, is just beautiful. So really well done. Thank you. And yes, this is very hard not to drink this wine. So, but we are going to move on to our third wine, Zinfandel. We have 2 chocolates to go with this. So I think we're going to taste the wine. Think about that. 1 chocolate, drink some water, go back to the wine, the 2nd chocolate, and then continue on that lovely path. So Michael, let's talk about Zinfandel here. Maybe Zinfandel, this is Murphy-Goode Zinfandel. It's Alexander Valley, it's Sonoma County. A little bit about Zinfandel and why it does so well, particularly in Sonoma County.
Well, I think, and thank you for asking that question. The areas of wine country, Zinfandel can kind of morph between a little bit cooler climates and a little bit warmer climates. And certainly different areas of California grow Zinfandel with very different flavors. There can be, I'm going to generalize, so forgive me, a more of a Chianti style, kind of red fruited Zinfandel that is very, very different than I think Sonoma County and Napa, Dry Creek and those areas, Russian River, that is a more dark fruited and jammier style. And this particular wine here is of that ilk. It is a wine that has what we call jammy fruit flavors and aromas of, black, certainly blackberry and black cherry. And I think I even get a little black raspberry in here too. But the Zinfandel grape is a much larger grape than Pinot Noir as far as the size of the berries, and the clusters are bigger too. And it can really perform extremely well. One of the reasons that we have such old vines and mature vines of Zinfandel in this area is because we have this powdery soil, certainly called the Goldridge soil, that phylloxera couldn't live in. And we have many, many vineyards and vineyard blocks of 100-plus-year-old vines of Zinfandel, especially in Sonoma County, which is just a true gift. And those vines grow fruit with intensity of flavor and it has acidity. People say Zinfandel is a really low acid grape, but it certainly can develop more acidity in a cooler place because of cooler nights. And there's that magic ripening area between sugar and acid where you can create wines like this that are extremely well balanced. And, Gwendolyn, I love what you said about the previous wine, the Pinot Noir, that it was really seamless. I think for a Zinfandel, this is extremely well balanced and seamless and gives you that plush fruit without being one of those kind of hit you over the head with a 2x4 kind of humongous wines that some people's perception of Zinfandel goes to that. I think this is really extremely a perfect candidate for pairing with some yummy chocolate.
Absolutely. And sometimes you do need a wine that hits you over the head, like a 2x4, especially this year. But I agree. I mean, I'm impressed every time I taste this because it does have that wonderful jammy aroma. But when you taste it, the structure just is there and it holds up. So I'm excited to kind of see what this can do with some chocolate. So I think the first one we have, Ralph, we are doing the dark chocolate, and then we're doing the Chardonnay smoked sea salt with cocoa nibs. Chocolate. So let's do the dark one first, which is obviously just simple, not simple like simple means, but dark chocolate. So tell us a little bit about how that kind of works with this wine.
Sure. I think this is the test of a dark chocolate. It's on its own. It's what it is. And with this chocolate, the things to note are the things I mentioned earlier. The snap, the appearance, and all those things. But this is an opportunity when you taste this chocolate. Put it in your mouth, let it melt a little bit, and then chew it. But as it's melting, notice how it's almost mouth cooling. And that's because of that beta 5 prime crystal that has a very specific melting point. And when it melts, it actually absorbs heat from your mouth. And that is very different than, let's say, eating something like a peanut butter, which is almost warming to your palate. This is very cooling, and it helps clear wonderfully. Another thing is that I mentioned the 20 micron particle size here, and that's what gives you that smooth creaminess. And this is what we like to say is a very low viscosity chocolate. So once it melts, it's not like thick in your mouth. It flows. These are some of the characteristics. Now it has all those other elements that we talked about before. This has 200 milligrams of cocoa flavanols, offset with that superfood Chardonnay Marc that then gives you this beautiful aftertaste. So you have all those fruity floral notes coming in at the end, the acidity coming in at the end, and this very clean finish.
It's very clean, and I love the way it melts. Can you speak to a little bit about just why, because you were talking about the heat and the cold, and you had mentioned you should have room temperature or even warm water, which I can't quite go there, but why not ice water? Why doesn't that work?
Yeah, great question, Gwendolyn. So what happens when you're eating chocolate is that it works best when your body temperature melts the chocolate, because that's the silkiness of chocolate is because it melts at body temperature, right? Now, if you're drinking cold water, you're actually taking the temperature of your mouth down. So if you really want to take a really good chocolate and make it eat very poorly, take a glass of ice, take a really great chocolate like this chocolate, take a glass of ice water and then eat it, and it'll be like eating wax, which is really, it'll warm up eventually, but it won't be a great experience.
Yeah, we talk to people a lot about drinking a white wine too cold or a red wine too warm or vice versa, and it's a similar experience. Maybe not wax, but similar experience. So Gillian, let's dive into trying this Zinfandel after the dark chocolate.
You bet. So I already cleansed my palate. I tried it, and I love what the commentary is suggesting so far, because having a chocolate without anything else in it is pretty interesting in that there's some purity there. And so that summer blackberry straight off the vine of the Zinfandel, right? With the purity and the cleanness and the cooling aspect, Ralph, that is fascinating. There's a yin yang thing working here with this pairing, because the Zinfandel is so lush and so vibrant and so filled with fruit. It's the yang, it's the exuberance, and the chocolate, which I would never have guessed, is the cooling yin of this conversation. And that is a very unexpected thing. And that is one of the great pleasures about pairing things together, is that it's full of surprise and you never ever will be jaded. I thought this was one of the best pairings of the day.
Yeah, I loved it. I really loved the purity of the chocolate. Yeah, I love cocoa nibs. I love salt in my chocolate. I love all of these things. Like I said, the cherry was fantastic, but that purity of the chocolate and the purity of the wine worked really, really well together, and just helped each one shine, I guess.
Gwendolyn, do you notice? I mean, really, truly, each of these two things makes the other one taste better. So that really, truly, it's a perfect pairing.
And that's always the thing. And we talk a lot of people always ask about food pairings, I feel like, and sometimes it's kind of, if you really love a wine, you really love a food, usually you'll be okay. But there are times that things, clash, which is not a good thing, but there are times that things really elevate the taste of either the wine or the chocolate. And I feel like, yes, this is definitely one of those times. So I think it should be encouraging to everybody to know that wine and chocolate pairing can be done, and it can be done well and happily. So let's try the second chocolate that's going with this is smoked sea salt. Is that correct? The Chardonnay smoked sea salt?
Yes.
And cocoa nibs. So smoked salt.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's really a pretty exciting idea. So what happens here is that we've actually taken the staves, I guess you call it staves, right? The barrel wood, and they've smoked the salt with that. And these happen to be Chardonnay barrels that are set aflame, and the smoke percolates through the salt. So we actually have a smoked salt made from Chardonnay barrels. And again, we have this great combination of tastes that go through it. The thing that would be a little bit to try to pick up is a little bit of the toastiness from that smoke, which blends in really nicely with the chocolate. And you have all the things that we mentioned before, that flavor build, the fruitiness at the end, and also the minerality of the salt itself. So enjoy. Oh, and I forgot to mention the cocoa nibs. They're those little bursts of flavor. And the great thing about cocoa nibs is occasionally you get one of them stuck in your mouth a little bit, and a little bit later you get a little pleasure. So
I thought you were going to tell me I need a little bit of floss later, but little pleasure later is also great.
I'm going to have another piece of chocolate.
I mean, again, we were talking a lot about salt, but Gillian, let's talk about this one, because the first one we didn't have any salt. This one we have some of that salt and that extra cocoa texture. How do you think that changes the taste?
It changes it dramatically. I mean, one of the best things that you can do is when you're prepping out a meal, lay out all your prep work, put two wines together. You got a couple of people in the kitchen, and just start tasting in context. And that's the beauty about this kind of tasting, is that you have context. So being able to taste two different chocolates with this wine is like night and day. We go from the purity of the fruit, right? The ripe fruit, it's just complete, at winemaker Dave Reddy's hand, you've just got this beautiful expression of dark fruit and zin. But then you move over to the smoked aspect of the salt, and really you begin to bring in the spice elements of zin, because spice is such an important element. And really, I'm picking it up back here again. It's not on my palate, it's in my nose. And then the other thing that you begin to see is that it picks up on the wood. The wood elements in the wine begin to shine and in the chocolate, and vice versa. To me, it's a little bit of a head case. This pairing. I want to get to know it better. I'm not completely sure how to work with it yet, and it's really interesting. It's not super straightforward in my mind, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I get that, because the first one, I felt that it really brought out the fruit of the Zinfandel, hands down, and this one, depending on where I was, there was a little bit more acidity in the Zinfandel, and there was a little bit more of the spice, like you said, where the fruit was kind of muted. So it was interesting. It was a little bit of a roller coaster / head case.
Yeah.
So I get that. Michael, what did you think? Do you like it?
I think Ralph was very sneaky with those cocoa nibs to create a much longer finish, because you find a little bitty bit of that, and then you bite on it, and it is again filling your palate with that flavor that is something that can pair with, or it's joining the finish of the wine, whereas the chocolate without any other accompaniments to it was just so seamless and just smooth in that way that they work together simultaneously. This, as Gillian is saying, is much more complex and has different layers and different times that they pair, from the beginning of your palate to the middle palate to the finish. And I think it brings out a lot of the spiciness of the Zinfandel, and certainly the vanilla tones in the oak, and the kind of caramelization of sugars that's in the wood, as well as those baking spice flavors, become a little more apparent in the wine because of this chocolate. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's very cool. I think this is such a great and fun tasting to see chocolate with wine, and especially a chocolate that's kind of connected to wine, in that blending with the Chardonnay Marc of trying to kind of balance that out and make it approachable with wine. Ralph, do you have any favorite chocolates, or do you normally pair this with wine, or are you just a chocolate person? Just
Well, if I look at, you mean beyond vine to bar, you mean? Or
either way, I was just kind of thinking, you're a chocolate aficionado. What's your?
Yeah, I think guitar chocolates are quite good, and yeah, they're not that available a lot of times, but they're a lot of professional people use guitar chocolates. I think they're
Oh,
excellent.
I was thinking, do you usually drink your chocolate with wine? Do you have it on its own? Do you
Oh
have it with
yeah,
coffee? What do you do with your
I
pairing?
I pair chocolate with wine. I pair it with pretty much everything. I have chocolate. I have chocolate every day, so
Okay.
it's
And
part of my life.
and I do want to point out again, we're talking about all these wonderful superfoods with red wine and the chocolate. So these are all wonderful things to do. So I want to thank you all for being here and taking the time to talk about the wine and the chocolate. And those of you at home, this set is still available. It's a 3 wines, 4 chocolates. I think it's a fantastic gift, especially because I think it's really cool to have all of these things together. But yeah, I want to thank you all, because I think this was very enlightening for people who might want to know how to pair wine and chocolate better. If there's anything else anybody wants to add?
Well, I have one thing to add, Gwendolyn, and which is that one thing that surprised me immensely is when we were going through the practice session for this, and we were trying these chocolates with all kinds of wines. I was very shocked to find that a fairly generous Chardonnay with a dose of barrel fermentation on it worked really well with these chocolates. And I'm still trying to figure out if it was, it's my mind, because of the Chardonnay Marc, or because it really does work. But I was with 6 other people, and we all went, wow, this is amazing.
Was it possibly the Chardonnay smoked salt, like with the staves, or was it just everything?
It worked with almost all of the chocolates.
Okay.
And it was exciting.
That's exciting. No, I love this idea. Yes, Michael?
I also have just 2 very quick things that I wanted to share. One, everybody listening, are you surprised how so many different varieties of wine can pair with chocolate? We were so stuck before thinking, well, it only goes with port wine or something like that. Rosé, Chardonnay, it's amazing. The other thing is, I was so impressed because being, so geeked out on flavors and aromas and things because of wines, that only recently they came up with a flavor wheel for chocolate, for tasting and aromas of chocolate. After all of these years of chocolate production, I thought that was fascinating, and it's something that I'm going to seek out more to work with. Thank you so much for introducing us to all of this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a great concept of working with chocolate with something that kind of has to do with wine. I feel like that has really made the pairing opportunities more broad. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. But just thank you so much for all being here. You've had so much wonderful things to say about the wine, the chocolate, the pairings. I appreciate your time and your amazing winemaking and your amazing chocolate making. And
bravo.
Cheers.
Thank you, Gwendolyn.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Yes, always.
It's both a science and a form of high art. It's made from the combination of grapes, sunlight, rain, soil, and time. It's raised up in the moments that matter. It's wine. And we are Wine.com. We have the largest wine selection in the world, online sommeliers with free advice, and now our powerful new app puts the entire world of wine in your hands. Wine.com. Seriously passionate about wine. Download our free app.